Hola community. We are streaming live from the Blender conference, my second podcast. But the first time that I met you, the first time that I see you actually was today in the stairs.
Yeah.
How?
Yes.
Well, if you don't know him, Erin Dale, master of geometry nodes. First time we ever met. I know your face from the internet, from the geometry nodes videos, of course, but even before that. And introduce yourself a little bit, and then I want to ask you about geometry nodes and the why, but please.
So I'm Erin. I work for Unity, and I'm like a geometry nodes artist, I guess you would say. I'm super specialized into geometry nodes, which it became a bit of like it's one of these things that like when you walk along with something as it becomes developed, you sort of can get like a real sense of ownership over it. So it's been amazing to get to see it develop, and it's just become my art medium, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's been awesome. Like I was doing a lot of like Sverchok and shaders before geometry nodes. So I was just like in a really great position of being like, oh my God, nodes, right? They're amazing. And then I remember like the first version of geometry nodes came out, and it was just like a Boolean and a transform node. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the best.
That's what I would like to ask you about, because geometry, like in the last Blender conference, there was no geometry nodes. The day geometry nodes branch started, you were an expert on it. How does it, why? There is a whole niche of like an area. Now there's like geometry nodes experts and assets and a community. How like where were you? I don't know.
Yeah, so I've done a lot of Sverchok, which is like, Sverchok is a Python-based modeling add-on. It's pretty popular with like architecture people, a bit more in like like from the design side, it has a lot of like curve tools, a lot of NURBS tools. And then if you're doing like, geometry generation, suddenly coming into geometry nodes where it's just like, and especially joining at the beginning, like those nodes were very intuitive, like just a Boolean, we know Booleans, just transform, we know transforms. And so it was like, oh, I can just like get a cube as a primitive, and if I can just like scale it down a little bit, cut it out of another one, you can actually do a huge amount just with primitives and transforms. So coming at it from like a very deep system of like Sverchok, where you can do almost anything, to suddenly like a very limited palette of tools, that's, I don't know, like as a creative, that's really exciting as well. Like being able to suddenly have like a very restricted palette, and then just working within that. So I definitely didn't get it straight off the bat. Like everybody who remembers the old attribute system, like that took some like getting used to work out. And then you would also not be able to go back to your node groups because
No. That was 2.92.
Yeah, 292, 291.
No, 292 was the first release. 293 was the second and last one of the old system. 3.0 was fields.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty young actually. So so you came from my background of Sverchok and animation nodes. Have you tried it?
Yeah, I used animation nodes for a while. I was always much more into generating geometry than doing special effects. So because my background was from interior design and like making furniture, so I was always much more of like, I want to make a thing. Even if that is just like a completely static object, like that's more exciting to me than doing special effects and particles. And the cool thing about animation nodes was you could really like program it. You could do like your subroutines, and you could make your loops, and your like really build up a very complex system. And it was great. Like I remember when we found out that Jacques was hired by Blender, like that was just so exciting for us because I have a Discord server where
by we you mean the community of Sverchok or your Discord community?
Yeah, so I have a procedural Blender Discord community, which it used to be a niche, and now everyone's like, oh, procedural Blender? Yeah, of course. Like, so.
Of course. So you're the OG. Okay.
But it's awesome because everybody was just like, oh my God, Jacques just got hired by Blender. Like, we were about to get animation nodes, but not Python, like a proper native version which runs fast and is performant and is usable and stable. Like that's geometry nodes from the beginning. I know like Delay always says this, like geometry nodes has always, as it's been in master, it's always been finished. And like it's always been stable. It's very hard to make a system that just breaks, other than through user error with geometry nodes, I find.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was from the design. So geometry nodes, I was involved in the first part of the team decisions as UI part, and also usability in general. So it was Simon Thomas, Jack Luke, and Hans on development, Simon on the everything else, and we had it was me and Dalai. So it was also one of the first projects where we used the like agile kind of sprints, which were not used as much in the development of Blender. So it was okay. This is one project. We're going to stand ups every day at 2:00 or something, and then I presentation at the end of the week. What did we do? What happened this week? And there was always going to have a demo of a working system. So the scope of geometry nodes was the idea was to make it really limited, in the sense like, okay, scattering. That's as much as far as we need to go for the very first release. So yeah, of course, maybe part of the community was a bit disappointed. It's like that, but just add animation nodes and Sverchok on by default. And no, the idea was to build something else. So do you see geometry nodes as a third entity that is not animation nodes, not Sverchok?
Yeah, I don't know how much it's going to take over from Sverchok, because there's certainly a lot of like the mesh operations that geometry nodes is going to be amazing at, and it can do like scattering systems, of course, like that's its real forte at the moment. And I think it's funny when you say like just doing scattering systems, because like as soon as you release that, the community comes around and is like, oh, this is what I can do if I can put geometry anywhere that I want it. Like suddenly you can build pretty much anything. Like if you look at November submissions from last year, like people were doing the most ridiculous things, and geometry nodes at that point was still very like bare bones. So we were all using like the 3.0 alpha and beta releases at that point for the new field system. And there just wasn't a lot of nodes in that. We were just having fun, like vector math. You can do whatever you want.
That was probably also triggering creativity, right? Like by scarcity, you get creative in what to do with the little tools that you have. Since then, geometry nodes had first scattering, then it was like fields, then named attributes, and curve support. Soon we might have Grace Pencil. I just come from a meeting about that in particular. It seems pretty promising. We have hair editing, curve editing tools, also like an edit mode. We recently got overlays and a viewer for geometry nodes. So it is getting there in the future. They're also planned for like collection nodes or rigging, basically relationship between objects. Today we just saw, were you in the USD?
No, I missed that one, but I'm really excited about USD.
AMD, Brian from AMD shown a USD editor with nodes. So it was like an input and output, input as a file, output as a render, and then you could see with a Hydra Delegate viewer, you could see USD seen in Blender with nodes. Nodes are definitely here to to stay. So where do you miss more the current system? Like where do you still use Sverchok for some things, or animation nodes?
No, I don't use animation nodes anymore. I think that's one thing that I have. The things which I needed it for, I can now do in geometry nodes, which is amazing, because I was never really using animation nodes to its full potential. Like I know there's people out there who can do amazing stuff with it. I was always just like, I just need to loop over this, or to do like one specific thing, like mesh trails, something like that. But now it's like, if you want mesh trails, there's community add-ons in Python which are like specific to that. And then, animation nodes I've kind of retired in my workflow, but Sverchok I will still use for like curves and NURB surfaces. But Blender has like a really weird relationship with NURBs. Like you'll never really supported them properly.
It's not it hasn't been supported, and that uses it. Well, if anybody is using it, please let us know. But there's no way to know if people are using it. The only way is if there are bug reports, then you see that people are using it. But either they are perfect or no one is using them chicken and egg basically. So it's like, how do you fix if there's no
It's
issues?
difficult to know as well. Like you can't please everyone, and it's like Blender is a piece of animation and 3D modeling software. It's not like a design tool for people are using it for that for sure. Like you can get your you can bring fusion models or whatever other models into like FreeCAD through Sverchok into Blender, and you can get that like talking to each other, and Sverchok will do your NURBS tessellation, which is amazing. But then that's like, oh well, the community is just, it's already built like a tool which is okay, like it can do the job. And I think a lot of people who are in, and we've seen a lot of talks through BlenderCon this time, where it's like animation studios or visualization studios who are bringing like visualization into their workflow, and that's where Blender is really excelling. And they're using it for design, but they're using it for the visualization, but they're never really using it for technical drawings or like the really like the actual buildable drawing stuff. But then I don't know, I think that's fine. Like Blender has its place, and it's 90% of a lot of people's workflows, and it doesn't need to be 100%. Like it can do a lot of stuff to an amazing level. So.
The king or queen of like node editing, right? Node workflows is Houdini, right? Houdini is like everything is a node, and if you keep clicking, you are right to a code basically in a node shape. Blender took a completely different approach for that. Everything is like its own little island. There is shading nodes, compositing nodes, geometry nodes now, and there will be more to come. Do you think that was that was a mistake, or do you think it's it fits in Blender's way of working, and at the end of the day, it's the same? Or
I think it's a discussion around accessibility. Like when it's difficult to know. Like if I was designing it. This is probably going to sound harsh. I think it's fine for nodes to be an advanced system. I don't think they necessarily have to be accessible, as long as there is a process which is accessible. Like as long as you can still come in and use like a subdivision modifier or have some high-level nodes. I know Delay was talking about doing like node groups that were shipped with Blender as like default node groups. So you'd have some high-level node groups that you could still like tab into and edit them, and like you could have them in your projects, but that way you can still have your main development being on the atomic nodes and then having your general node groups. But then it's just like this accessibility thing, isn't it? Like if you've got everything like Houdini, it's amazing, it can do everything more or less, but it's very difficult to learn. Like a lot of people really struggle with learning Houdini. And then geometry nodes, the adoption rate that we've seen for geometry nodes has been insane. Like people are just flocking to it because it's so accessible. Relatively speaking, like I know it's still a complicated tool, but
we still don't have that concept, even though it is under development, and it's coming in some shape to 3.4 already, which is the project is called Node Group Assets, and the idea is that the same way you do Shift A to add a node. Right now, when you do Shift A, add node, everything there is its own little piece of code that it represents a node. There's no node groups integration there, unless of course you go to the groups where you have your own groups, or like the kit of groups that you make for convenience, I guess, reinventing the wheel every time. But the idea is that in that menu, even without telling them apart, it's just like more accessible ways of grouping those building blocks in a nicer and more user-friendly way that will ship with Blender. So it will get easier eventually. But regarding the connection there was some friction between connecting the attributes from shading into into geometry nodes, especially through cycles, Eevee.
I said this to Ton earlier today because I was like, oh, it's a shame we can't just have all of the node groups like have one super node graph, and you can just like go down into
that scene level, like workspace level.
Well, I remember opening I think it was 1.8 like last year or something like that, and it has a scene depth graph. Like
the OOPS window, the object oriented something.
Yeah. I had no idea when I was using it back then that it was actually a node graph that was available for the scene. And you could see all your like parent-child hierarchies in graph form, and it's like, why does Blender not have that now? That would be amazing. But then I guess like, what's the use case really?
The thing is that you couldn't do much with it other than inspect your scene. Even for that alone, I would still keep it around. I mean, we have editors that are even more useless. Still, no. Some of them got removed in 2.8, but the Oops window was still available. I think until 2.49.
Oh, really?
I think so. Yeah, or 2.3. One of the big changes. But yeah, that would be pretty useful. Would you rather have that as a like scene and then objects?
I like the idea of being able to go up and down and making visual connections. So when we moved to fields from the attributes before, I thought that was that was the smartest decision, because if you can see something being plugged together, you can actually start having an intuitive relationship with the work that you're doing, rather than it being like, oh, I know I'm holding this information and I'm going to do this maths to it, but it's really abstract and everything's completely obfuscated by the nodes. Like as soon as you just like unplug in some maths together, you can see exactly what it is you're doing. And I think like being able to extend that to like plugging from geometry nodes into shaders, that's suddenly quite powerful as well. But then I also appreciate, like Ton said to me before, that like because different things are processed at different times, and it just makes it actually much more confusing, like what's actually available in different situations and how do you actually connect stuff together and how do you make that obvious to the user. Like some of this is available here in this context and some of it is not available in this other context, even though you're sort of in the same node graph. So I guess it makes sense to have it separated in Blender's world. And I think from an accessibility point of view as well, you don't have to learn all of the nodes. You can just be like, I'm just going to learn some PBR workflows in shader nodes. I'm not going to go anywhere further than that. And that's fine, that you can just do that, you just do those nodes. And then you can expand that into geometry nodes, and it's like, I'm just going to do a bit of noise displacement and not need to know the whole gamut of what's available to you.
You don't make nodes the only way of, not only the only way, but the first way of editing things. Imagine if you have to do everything like that, modeling, or I don't know. Well, you cannot do probably already. So do you really use, you are now working at Unity, right? Since recently, this year, was it?
Yeah, this year, since April.
And that's your job. Did you get hired because of proceduralism and everything that has to do with nodes?
Yeah, I basically got hired to use geometry nodes. That was...
Blender geometry nodes.
Yeah.
It's a dream, right? Which you were doing already anyway.
It was nice because it was like, oh, this thing that I do every day and I make videos about and I just want to talk about, like I just want to talk about this all the time. If people probably realize this by now. But like when they were like, oh, we can like pay you to do this for us. It's like, oh, this is amazing. This is exactly what I want to do. So it's awesome because I'm also able to keep doing teaching and making courses on the side, and like I'm able to do what I want to do and I'm passionate about, which is like the community work and like talking to people and sharing the information, but also have that like feedback to us in the Unity and like the tools that we're building with geometry nodes, talking to Unity, and it becomes like a really nice workflow, and there's a really great symbiotic relationship between Unity and Blender, and they both have like the same idea of like democratizing creativity and having everything communicate to each other and basically making storytelling more accessible. So
yeah, Unity not only is a sponsor of Blender, they also sponsor with like developers. They have developers working there. William used to be part of the UI team in Blender, is now working there. You are working there. So it's spreading all over the place. So it's good actually, and they're the only like game engine or other software that actually can import blend files directly without. I know that in other softwares you need to do you have more steps.
Yeah.
So the fact that they went that far, it's awesome. But without maybe going to details, because probably you can talk about it. But do you have to come up with impossible like they ask you for like impossible things that you reach a roof, or you already are so used to it? It's like you're like a concept artist that they ask you for something and it's just scribble and it's done.
So I do definitely come up against like a ceiling with what can be done with geometry nodes on a semi-regular basis. I think this is something that is sort of a misconception about, like when you're seeing people's work on Twitter or Instagram, a lot of the work that we're posting that we're like, that looks really cool, I'm going to share this, we've just sort of arrived at. If you're starting off with a design that you want to realize, that's a very different process. Like saying this has to look this specific way, you can often run into loads of challenges with that. And that's something which I've run into quite a lot. And a lot of this stuff, though, it's not like geometry nodes is never going to do it. It's like, it just doesn't do it yet. So we'll come up with like a temporary solution or like a hack around, and then in a month or 6 months or a year or whatever, the knowledge that that's going to be in the system anyway, like all of the stuff that I've ran into is never like, oh, it's a shame Blender's never going to be able to do this. It's just like, okay, I can see that there's already bug reports, there's already patches, I can try out this branch. Like with the UV nodes, for a while I was just like, oh, it's such a pain, I can't use UVs. So like everything in my geometry nodes, so basically if you're doing stuff with geometry nodes and you want to use UVs, the easiest way to do it is to have modules which already have UVs on them, pass them through, don't mess around with the UVs, don't mess around with the geometry, and just like combine stuff. That's a process and it works, and that's like totally serviceable. But I was already able to start playing with the UV nodes and was like, oh, there's an experimental branch, I can just do that. And now it's in the stable branch as well. So you can actually just use UVs now and you can do your UV unwrapping. So suddenly you're exposing yourself to a lot more procedural modeling ability. And that's obviously, we're not just working within Blender, we're working with Blender into Unity. So everything that we make has to be like a viable final result, which again is great though, because we're getting the ability to kind of stress test the tools. And obviously I'm quite passionate about geometry nodes, so I'm always like trying to test the new tools, trying to see how I can break them basically.
Yeah.
And then, no, it's a great fun process though. You can really like get deep into doing kind of just whatever. And geometry nodes has so many avenues to explore. And the tools that we're using as well, it's not just geometry nodes that I can use. It's like anything, if you can see it in Blender, you can get it into Unity through the tools. Some people might have like seen MeshSync on Twitter. So anything that you see in the Blender viewport can be read into Unity. So it means that like, oh, I couldn't transfer normals from a sphere onto my tree canopy. Oh, well, that's fine. I can just use a particle system and the transfer data modifier. And there you go. There's like a workflow that's going to work for you. It's like there's always a way that you can do stuff with Blender. You're never up against a wall, which is amazing. Like for a piece of software to be able to always provide. Yeah.
As a you're a part of the geometry nodes development team, but how do you call it? The module, as a module member. Yeah, so by giving feedback, providing feedback, providing demo files as well, and testing. That's kind of a
yeah. I mean, it's amazing to get to be that close to the development as well and see. I don't want to say that I'm able to steer it, because I think like a lot of times I come up with ideas.
No, but actually I was going to ask that. It's like they feel empowered to say like, hey guys, you're doing all wrong. I focus on this.
I definitely have come at them basically saying that.
Yeah.
And I think generally when we were doing the change from attributes to fields, there was a lot of friction. Like I had, and it was never about like, oh, well, I've got a product and I'm going to
Were you involved in that?
I was very much like, I don't like the attribute workflow, but then when they were designing the fields workflow, I was like, this is different and I don't like it. So there was friction like in both directions, I think.
It was a huge bet. The team has been working already on a system that it was being used by people and they were doing great things with it. And then, I don't know, it was like 6 months in or something like that. It was like, okay, we have to decide if we want to not throw away, because it was a great proof of concept, but kind of throw away 6 months of work and then start over. And imagine doing that in another company, or like you can't afford that kind of stuff. That kind of throwing away work that is being done. It's like making a film. It's like, nah. And then it's like almost when people are already like watching it, it's like, no, stop it. It's like, no, we're going to remake it. And you change completely the storytelling of a tool.
But it's amazing that Blender can be that agile and just say like, oh, this actually isn't working and we're just going to have to redo it. They were able to because it was the LTS release though, right?
Yes, 2.93 was the last release to have that, the old system, and happened to be an LTS. So that was actually perfect, because for 2 years, and they actually still active until next year. So people can still use whatever they were using back then, and it's going to be supported and fixed until next year. And so for a few releases, there were no name attributes. So there was actually a loss in functionality. However, if you only used LTS releases that come out every year, so almost like a regular software, you would, if you use the next LTS, 3.3 LTS, you would have named attributes. So it's like you never lost a thing, almost. You gotta learn a few things again, but not even that bad. And there people, especially if you're like a Blender fan, is like, oh, this Maya sucks, or like other, the systems that maybe or software that are older and more mature, you could say, but they can't afford this. So it's not like their fault. I bet the developers would like to like throw away their code and make it again and nice and new. But you have a lot of companies that have like their build their pipeline for 10, 20 years using that software, so you can't afford that. And Blender has that advantage that you can just do it. You can, of course, every year that passes, it gets harder and harder, so that the LTSs were introduced, so we could think like that. But it's not other software's fault all the time. They gotta keep things running.
Yeah.
But I would say, well, Ton yesterday on the podcast that we had with Andrew Price and Ton's advice to Autodesk was just make a new team, split up your company and have the entertainment team like remake Maya from scratch. What would you do? How would it look? And I think that would be a risky move, but if you want to stay relevant, I think it's maybe not a bad thing to just do.
I think you kind of have to, even like a big company, like I think you have to have some foot in the future. You can't just be polishing what you've got. And I think this is something that I've kind of seen a lot at Unity, is like we're doing a lot of, like we have a lot of labs teams and we have a lot of very like forward-looking future projects going on. And it's really exciting to see that there's like a lot of research being done, like a lot of pure research being done as well, like with universities and things. And it's like you've got to have that kind of view to the future if you want to be able to be relevant. Because, a lot of these companies are developing they are basically developing for this year right now, but they're also developing for 5 years and for 10 years.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that the software that you release in 10 years is relevant in 10 years based on projections you're making now. And I think with Blender, you can have a little bit of a shorter term look because you can be more agile. And I think that makes you stay more relevant as well, because you're never having to guess and then commit and like have that sunk cost. So you can, kind of keep things up to date in a way which is a bit more natural.
It is. And natural, speaking of natural, we got a new, a wild Francesco appeared. So while I set up the camera, because you don't fit here.
Should I reframe?
No, oh yeah, well, frame yourself without you. Okay. So this is your first conference, by the way. How was it? Because that's the person that is actually kind of running the whole show with the help of many other people. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, because we've been to many Blender conferences, and for this this time is a completely new building. A lot of things are new. A lot of things are going great, right?
That's the sound of me running up and down the stairs. Yeah, it's good. It's good, yeah.
So this is your first conference, and so far, I think... Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, we're trying to... Oh, yes. Can we shrink? There you go. So what was your first experience in a nutshell, and then the experience from the other side?
So my experience, it's been amazing. Like, I'm so genuinely impressed at how nice everybody is and like how exciting the work everybody is doing. Like, I was genuinely expecting it to be like you turn up and it's a networking event and everybody's just trying to shill their projects and do networking and like give you their business card. And then you turn up and everybody's like, oh, I just want to talk about the amazing work that I've seen on Twitter, and like somebody's developing this, and like somebody else is starting a new business, and somebody else is like, oh my God, you got to meet my friend who's been working in the industry for 20 years. And it's just, everybody is so excited to be here and so excited to be working with Blender as well, which I think like it's a really wholesome vibe. Like, people genuinely want to be here because of Blender, not because they want to get something for themselves. They just want to like hang out and talk to like-minded people.
We all have this in common. Rob, also from Decoded channel, he said like, I haven't seen any trolls here. What is it? I was expecting, I mean, you can have 700 people and then not anyone like saying this sucks or whatever. So how is it for you? Because you've been, well, Francesco Sirif, you probably know an introduction, but you've been, what's the role? What's the name of the role name for running a conference?
It's a producer.
Producer of a conference.
You produce the event. Yeah, it's an event, and of course, like it's a lot of the work is divided between Ton and myself, and we work together to define a little bit like the concept for it, and also to try and define the scale for it. This is the first time that we'd have something this big, and it has always been like a challenge to understand when do you stop to make it bigger, because actually in 2019, when was the last time we did it, it was already getting quite massive. We went to a new venue and it was already like 400 people or so, and we were like, okay, this is great, but when you get like to maybe 800, 1,000, then you don't know people anymore. It's very dangerous to do that. And so then let's start making other events. So there was the Blender Conference US that we wanted to make. And then things happened. And so then we came back to this and decided, okay, let's just try to scale it up a little bit more and see what happens. But basically the concept is, to just define this, and then in practice you break down a lot of tasks. There are a lot of things, and then you divide the roles and responsibilities, make sure that things get done. So, yeah.
What is the limit for a Blender conference, do you think? Is like, what's the ceiling? Is this the ceiling? Well, we're literally on the top of the...
I think we are. I don't know. I am very curious to sit down and talk to people afterwards, like with a bit of clarity. I have seen people very happy. So I think that the amount is still manageable, I think. And it has a lot to do also with the right amount of parallel tracks that you have. Because if you only would have like 2 sessions at the same time, I think it would feel less organic and more like massive. And I think that the ability to, instead of like 4 or 5 things going on all the time, and people feel like, I want to see this or I want to see that, I think that is still good. So I felt that it was not overwhelming. From my perspective, like, because I try and keep an eye on everything. That's definitely, I reached my limit. So we really need to scale out more in terms of organization, like possibly double the amount of
people,
internal staff that are working on things. I think that's definitely something that we have to do if we do this again.
And if you had to dream of what would be your dream conference? Would it be in the 17th century building in the center of
classical
Amsterdam?
Building in the center of Amsterdam with a window open, with a window that you can open? There are some rooms that unfortunately the windows cannot be open and there is no oxygen, just like one actually, but it's like very popular, so that's a little bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, and here we have we are spoiled. There's a window open. We have the Anna Frank house there, tower, the museum over there. It's a fantastic.
It's beautiful. No, but I think this is, I'm super happy with this. Like I think that this is very, very nice. I think that maybe because of the building, it's spectacular. It comes with some minor accessibility problem, but that's, I think overall it's great. Yeah. For you, Erin, that is the first time that you come to the conference, right?
Yeah. So this is my first one. I've definitely seen like from the videos of previous ones, obviously being in a different venue, but in this one as well, like because you're constantly passing people on the stairs.
Yeah.
I mean, you get fit. Like I've done a lot of stairs this weekend. But like you have a lot of very organic interactions with people where you're just like, oh wait, I know them from their videos, or I know that person from like wherever, and then you can just like have a chat on a landing somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a lot more just getting to meet people and having to chat with people just by virtue of everybody's like passing each other all of the time. So it's been crazy. Like I've got to chat to, I don't know, maybe like 70 or 100 people throughout the course of the past few days, which has been nuts. And like, getting to like properly get to know people rather than it just being like, oh, I saw somebody just before a session, but then I didn't actually get to talk to them. So I think in that respect, it has worked really well being here.
Yeah, when we walked in the first time, I was like, I looked up and there was this stairwell and I was like, okay, this is where it's going to happen. And that's the thing that we kept thinking when the rooms get full and you imagine all this flow of people going up and down the stairs, is it going to work? Because that's really important. So, I'm happy that it actually, sort of worked.
You visited multiple venues. What made you choose this one?
I think Well, one thing was really the space. This venue is also brand new. It has a lot of nice facilities. So, when you're organizing an event like this that is centered around multimedia, you want to have at least some sort of projection, sound system, sound facilities, and things like that. And having a venue that can take care of that is good. This venue is affiliated with the place where we did the conference a couple of years ago. So it's the same team. They have a very good ethos. We're really happy to work with them. And so that's, I think, in Amsterdam, this I would say for this type of event, a very, very nice building to do it. And it's probably one of the best venues you could find to do this. So, yeah.
If you had to change anything at the conference, what would you change? The place, the location, the date, and the end of October? Is that
So this year has been remarkable, I have to say, in terms of weather. I think people that came here for the first time, they think, oh, this is
every
the
day.
window open at the end of October. I would say that in Amsterdam is not that usual. Like walking in at the event, like there is no wind right now, and it's 21 degrees. So I know that there are some skeptics out there, but let's not get into that. But I do think that this is something I've never seen before in more than 10 years coming to the Blender conference. So we talked about in the past, hey, let's make it in spring. So it's more like a different vibe. But, I think this was the best. I'm so happy with it. Yeah.
Do you think the LA conference or the American conference or even, I don't know, an Asia, Blender conference Asia is in the horizon?
I would love to, like we talked about it. And we are oscillating between, empowering the community to organize it themselves and trying to make something more, quote, official, like a Blender Foundation back, something that we produce ourselves. After having done this event for for Tony it's 20 years. For me, it's like maybe 7 years or so. You have a lot of insight in how you want the event to be, how you want to feel. And that's I think, it really starts with the communication, with how you pick the speakers, how you pick the topic, how do you do things. I can always do things better, but to really keep it an event that doesn't attract, indeed, like that kind of business networking vibe, but it's like for the people. It's like people that want to show their stuff, and that's the core of the conference. That's what I love, and that's what everybody loves. So having that and trying to pass that kind of insight in anyone that is doing an event, I think it's pretty difficult. But there are, of course, other people in the community that I'm sure can understand and appreciate that. So I definitely hope that we manage to scale it more worldwide, because then you really manage to keep the personal connection. So yeah, it's difficult, but we try.
There are already actually conferences organized by the community all over the place. There is the Blendiveria in Spain. There is the Blender Day in London. That is just the one day, but it's actually done more often than not, right? They have once a month. You get together. People get together. I think in
London is its own country,
so.
really.
Yeah.
In the north.
But ever been to Blender Day?
I've not actually been down to it. I have seen that it's happening though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been once, and it was pretty cool actually. It's like so yeah. In some places you can do a day.
Yeah.
In Paris they did it also, I think.
Those things are great, because then you get also to do it like more local, more regional, and it really helps people to connect with each other. That can be then also a little bit more network, like people looking for jobs, people looking to get an opportunity, to hire people. So those things are also great. So yeah, it's something to think about how we can scale this.
I think it aligns with the Blender philosophy and the freedom to create conferences.
Yeah.
To run conferences. Wow. How would you describe this one if you had to? Like so far in the last 3 days?
No, I think this is by far the best we had. I mean, they're like all conferences, they are special in their own way, because everything happens, like everything different happens every time. And I think because we kept growing it, like this is yet, every time a conference is over, we sit down and we think, okay, how did things go? What can we do better the next time to make it more fun, to make it more interesting, and so on. And we had yet again the opportunity, first of all, like just being able to do a conference this year, that's already an achievement. So even if it would have been like, in one room with 10 people, that would have been already, So for that, I'm super happy. But on top of that, like to really try to push it and make it, it's the little things like the food, people are happy with the food. and to make sure that people are happy with the food. It's for so many different cultures, different expectations. You don't want to get the lines too long, just like without getting too much into the logistical details. But the thing as simple as eating, which you need to do every day, and that you are happy with it, that puts you in a good mood. So like I am just for these little things that they work out, I am so happy, So that's those are the things that they made me happy. Yeah.
And this year it sold out 2 months in advance.
Yes.
How are we gonna tackle that next year, or just?
We got to a point where people were calling on the phone at the office, being like, "Hey, I know you're sold out, but can I get a ticket?" And so we definitely need to, without frustrating people, we just have to communicate this better. And I think that the reason way out is always Blender conference always sold out. So let's keep it that way.
Let's keep it that way. And I would say somebody mentioned like other open source projects. Have you ever had other open source projects like as part of the conference, like inviting other open source projects? I don't think it happened at SIGGRAPH at some point that there was like the open source pavilion. But what is it with Blender that can do it, and why are not other open source projects that are like doing these kind of events? I know Godot Conf has had one.
Okay.
Yeah, but what is it? What is it that makes the Blender community make their own conferences together in other places? What is it? What is it? What is it?
So, in case you don't know what is it question is like often back then. Now it's not that more often. It became part of our lingo at the studio because very often during art reviews we would be looking at something and then Ton would sometimes be around and you would be looking at the artwork or something being developed and it was not really final. There was something missing, and we would ask ourselves, "What is it that is missing?" So this "what is it" really became a catchphrase, and that's why sometimes we just say it to each other. But I do think that, of course, Ton's initial idea to just bring people together by simply organizing an event, because it started very humble. That's the whole thing. Like you just want to bring people together to celebrate. In that case, was Blender becoming free software. And that was it. Simple and plain as that. And I think that need to bring people together, sometimes maybe in other communities is not so strong because of whatever reason, it doesn't matter. And to really have someone that has the passion for making that happen. Because this kind of producer role, like the person that goes like, okay, now I'm going to do it. That's like, that you need to want to do it. And that's, it takes, you need to have a little bit that attitude that you want to make it happen. And it's not for everyone. And everybody has their own skills. I may not be the best developer out there, but at least having passion for having people sharing things, like that's the thing. And that is as valuable, because you can have a project full of geniuses and engineers and designers and everything, but if you don't have the passion for bringing them together, then that's not gonna take you to the next level. And I think that Blender is very lucky to have had this in Ton for many, many years. I think that's one of the things that made the Blender project special.
It is definitely. Yesterday, something that I like about this conference is that there was many of the rooms had like a one purpose. We had the studio room, which only for studio staff. Classroom was also longer talks, and I think that worked out. There's special interest groups that actually some rooms had some talks had a lot of interest, like a USD today. And even a meeting room. Today, I just came back from a Grease Pencil meeting, which is, it was basically just getting together people from studios and from the Blender, the Grease Pencil development team, and from the Geometry Nodes development team. And that was amazing. So the goal was to, the outcome of this meeting is the Grease Pencil node, Geometry Nodes project is full steam ahead. But they're going to have meetings, like module meetings that they don't do, like Geometry Nodes has, but the Animation Works has, but not Grease Pencil. They're going to have that. They are going to plan a workshop at some point. They want to do a sprint at some point. People were like, okay, yeah, we should need to get together and do like a mini code quest. And somehow it's going to happen. Yeah, I'm going to talk with my boss to get studios involved as part of it. So there is will for that to happen. And I think Blender Conference it is really the only way of making this happen. Because yeah, you can say online at some point that we're gonna get together, but just being able to sit down, and there was a bit of a resistance at first to settle. Okay, pick a day, set a day. Okay, or what time? At 2. Now, well, we in Spain they start eating at 2, so now okay. And then because it was Spa Studios also, they're using Grease Pencil, and they have developers working on Grease Pencil, and yeah, that kind of interactions only happens at a conference.
I love the side code quest.
The side
It's
code,
like the side quest of the code quest.
Side quest of a code quest, yeah. And it was the dudes, it was there. So I was like, make an open movie, and it was like, oh well, I mean, I don't know, but those ideas I think can only happen with this modules, meetings, like pushing Blender development in one way or another. What is left? Yes, actually,
I have to go to prepare the final, the grand finale. I'm gonna make a little surprise for Ton in the end. He doesn't know. He's probably not watching the live. I'm pretty sure it's not. So I have to go prepare for that.
That's gonna be at 5:30.
It's at 5:30. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a little bit
together
of time.
some slides for the closing event, and then we wrap it at 6, and then it's gonna be. I can't believe it. Like I feel like I just woke up on the first day. And it's already.
When do you start? When does the preparation for the Blender conference starts? You have to be more or less.
It depends which.
Like, is it like to look for a venue, for example, and then to get the people for the AV and the team that is uploading the videos to YouTube, all like constantly?
It takes months, right? Like, so I think in April, May, we're already negotiating with the venue, probably sooner. So like now we probably already make an agreement with the venue for the next year if we want to be in talks, because then they can pencil down the dates. I mean, getting an entire building rented for 3 days is not something that you do overnight. And then go slowly, and then like the last month it starts to explode, and the last 3 days it's like really full steam ahead. And the first day you're really, really prepared, and it's like, okay, it held together. Like you're really all hands on deck, ready for disasters. And if it goes smoothly, then you let down your guard a little bit on the second day, like it happened yesterday. And then things can happen. Things go a little bit, So then you get it together again. And then the third day is like, okay, you start to chill because people had their fun. And today the vibe is really relaxed. I think people are very, okay, they're wrapping things up.
Hangover.
And then on Sunday, there is the grand finale, when at the end of the evening after the open day at the studio, that's when you want to go in a sensory deprivation tank and stay there for a week. But that's,
that's tomorrow we have the open studio day. People are going to drop by. So, okay, well, thank you, Francesco. One last question. If you had to choose producing conferences or film?
Who is asking this question?
I don't know.
That's not a question. A conference about movies. That's what I would
produce. Oh, so NSC.
Definitely not a movie about conferences, but definitely, I don't know. It's a tough question. The thing is that with movie, conferences, you can bring more people together in person, and it's like, in a sense, it's a little bit easier to do. Like if you would say produce a film, like a feature film with a crew like of 80, 100 people, I think that's a very fun challenge to do, and I would love to do that at some point, for sure. And organizing conferences, you can always do. So I'm not able to answer this question, sorry.
All right.
Thank you for having me, and it was good to see you. Like we just crossed each other in the stairwell before. I hope I get to talk to you later, and to you, Pablo, too.
Thank you for making this possible, by the way. So clap, 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 clap. It's all right. Francesco City, leaving the building. It is sorry that I wanted to ask so many questions, and also for people to see the face of the responsible of this happening. I wouldn't be able to, when I see him working all the time, and then he's talking to me about a thing, because he is not only producing it, but the website, the schedule, the Blender conference.blender.org, that system it's partially we have Anna working for development at the studio, and him and myself. So it is like development, producing.
It's a busy one.
It I don't know, but you need the drive for that, because I don't know. Do you have anything like that? Because you have a big community. Do you think of gathering people? I know the Deuce is actually going into that direction. In November, he's going to have a gathering and an event. Are you that kind of person?
That's actually really tempting. Like, after seeing how good this conference has been, it definitely makes me feel like I want to do, because so many of us work from home, work remotely. So having some, like being able to touch something, like that's crazy.
You're
I haven't
real.
done that for years. So being able to like meet your community and like meet other people who are interested in the same thing, I think it's like there's a lot of value in that. So I would really like to be able to do that. I think my Discord community, there's like 6,000 people, but they're very distributed. Like I guess similarly for you, right? So we've got like a lot of community in India, we've got a lot of community in America, and then a lot of community in Europe as well. So it's like, where do you pick? But then maybe it's an excuse to go on holiday, right? So
it is an excuse to go on holidays. And I would say that next year, you could save one of these spaces, I'm pointing to the schedule, to maybe why not do the special interest group about proceduralism.
That's actually a good
and you
idea.
get to see, because that's another way to build community inside of an already made event. People are coming for the Blender conference, so why not just either hear the conference or go to a cafe, not a coffee shop, a cafe. Otherwise, not much is gonna come out of that. But to discuss and keep building the community.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have to get in early. I know the schedule. Like as soon as I was thinking about like talks or anything, it was like, oh, schedule's full. Like people are really on it with getting their submissions through.
There is always room, though. I mean, the schedule's full, but there are ways to shuffle things around, or maybe, unfortunately, some things are all gonna overlap. But for the special interest group, especially, there is like more flexibility. It's not always full. So actually, even if you would have we would have talked about this on a Friday, maybe you could have squeezed it in for a Saturday or something. But yeah, that would actually be pretty neat. So for closing now, what can we expect from you? Because now you have a full-time job and also a YouTube channel and a Discord community. What's next? Do you have a course coming out, or
Well, I only just released a course, so I'm having a little break. So I just have an advanced geometry nodes course just released. We're still in launch week. You can still get 20% off.
Nice. Where? At Erindale on your YouTube channel, you have more info? Or
there's definitely more info on my YouTube channel, or you can just go to canopy.games and you can find it linked on there. It's the advanced geometry nodes course.
How advanced are we talking? Like,
I mean,
the top of knowledge that you know?
No. It's not beginner. I do have a beginner course as well, so you should be able to go through the beginner course and then into the advanced course. But I definitely think, I mean, it's the thing. I basically wanted to cover the things which are fun and that people are asking for. So we cover like SDF workflow, shortest path nodes, accumulate field, just like all of the good stuff to make fun models. They're not necessarily very performant or game ready, but they're just like, it's the fun processes. So if you're interested in using geometry nodes for just generally making stuff, and I think, you've got, 2 days now to do the course before November. So
no pressure. And November this year is actually probably going to have maybe some more compositing because of the real-time compositor in 3.4. Yesterday we had a party event here where there was visuals by Simon Thomas, another geometry nodes guru, and he was performing visuals live with Eevee basically running like spacebar animation running, and then the compositor live driven effects with MIDI controller. Did you see it?
I didn't get to see it. I didn't get a chance.
Oh yeah, there was you could tell that's glare. That's the lens distortion node. That is a blur. Yeah, but it was all live for 2 hours. Didn't crash once, so it was pretty insane. So November is gonna be kind of big. Are there already the prompts are there out?
The prompts will come out, I believe, on the 31st. Don't hold me to that, but it should be just before. And this year it's
so Monday.
Right. Yeah. So this year we're doing. I say we. I'm not an organizer. It's 2 days per prompt, so people shouldn't burn out like they have in previous years, which is going to be nice. So you can just take 2 days, make the coolest thing you want to make, share it on Twitter, and just kind of join the fun, join in the competition.
Yeah, I talked with Manu Järvinen, and he said, "Are you joining geometry nodes?" November. And he was like, maybe for the first day, and then work on that for the entire month or something like that. So, right, looking forward to what you are going to come up with if you are. And
I'll make something.
we'll
That's
make
the thing. Like you say, I'm in a full-time job, but full-time job's only 40 hours a week, and there's
only 40.
there's a lot of hours in the week.
I know. I mean, and they have 24. So in 2 days, you could just fill up all those hours, and then you have the rest. So 2-day weeks. All right. So that is all. Thank you, and thanks everybody for tuning in. This is the last podcast, by the way. So the conference is nearly over. Check out the YouTube channel for the videos that are coming out with the special little gift that we have for Ton. And I don't think he's going to watch this anyway. So yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah. Oh, no, people could. No, don't spoil it. Bye. See ya.
See you later.
And ciao.